Hazel Mercer had exactly $11 left in her wallet, a 6-year-old daughter named Rosie, who needed new winter boots before the first snowfall, and a landlord who had stopped pretending he wasn't losing patience. It was the kind of Tuesday in late October that made Toronto feel personal about being cold. Hazel stood at the kitchen counter of their one-bedroom apartment in Scarborough, holding a printed job listing her coworker Jen had slipped under her door the night before. She'd read it 3 times already. Private household assistant, live-in position. High net worth individual. Discretion required. Duties include personal care, daily scheduling, correspondence management. Competitive salary. References mandatory. The address listed was in Rosedale. Hazel knew what Rosedale meant. She'd grown up in Ajax, watched her mother take 2 buses to clean houses on those quiet, tree-lined streets. She'd promised herself she'd never be on the wrong side of that equation. But Rosie's boots had holes in the soles, and the heating bill was 3 weeks overdue, and some promises had a way of quietly renegotiating themselves when you weren't looking. She called the number before she could talk herself out of it. The man who answered the interview wasn't what she expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected. Somewhere in her mind, she'd imagined someone old, fragile, the kind of wealth that had softened into quiet gentleness. Jonathan Ashworth was 39, sat very straight in his chair, and looked at her the way executives looked at quarterly reports, scanning for the number that would either confirm or disappoint. He'd been blinded in his right eye 6 months ago. A car accident on the 401, the kind that happened in February when the ice was invisible and everyone drove like the road owed them something. He hadn't regained full peripheral vision and wasn't expected to, though he'd made it clear, through his assistant, through the agency, and now directly, that he didn't consider this a disability so much as an inconvenience he was actively managing. His left eye worked fine. He used it on her now. "You have no formal caregiving training," he said. "No," Hazel said. "I have 5 years of administrative work. I'm organized, I don't panic, and I'm told I have good instincts with difficult people." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, though it didn't become a smile. "Who told you that?" "My last 3 managers. You can call them." He looked down at her resume, a pause that started long enough to feel intentional. "My condition requires someone who can read documents aloud, accompany me to meetings where visual materials are involved, and manage my personal schedule without needing to be told the same thing twice. It also requires someone who understands that what happens in this house stays in this house." "I understand that. My sister Margot's also lives here part-time," he said. "She manages 2 of my investment properties. She may ask you to perform tasks on her behalf. You are employed by me, not by her. That distinction matters." He said it plainly, without warning in his voice. But Hazel had listened carefully to people her whole life, had learned to hear the things underneath the things, and she heard something in the way he said his sister's name that made the back of her neck prickle. "Understood," she said. He offered her the position at the end of that same meeting. She took the bus home, called Jen to say she'd gotten it, and spent the rest of the night explaining to Rosie that Mommy's new job meant staying at a big house on weekdays, but that she'd call every single day, and that Rosie would stay with Auntie June, and that it was going to be okay. "Is the man nice?" Rosie asked. Hazel tucked the blanket under her daughter's chin. "He's complicated. Like the raccoon at the park? A little bit like that, yes." The house was Georgian, dark red brick, half hidden by a maple that had gone fully orange. Hazel arrived Monday morning with a single bag and the particular alertness of someone walking into a place they don't yet understand. The housekeeper, a sturdy woman in her 60s named Doreen, met her at the door and walked her through the routine the way someone walks you through a fire escape plan. Efficient, no frills, with the implication that you might actually need this information someday. Jonathan took his coffee at 7. He did not like it talked about. Correspondence was to be read aloud at 8:15 after he'd been to his home gym. Physical therapy 3 times a week at 10. He had calls in the afternoon and didn't want to be interrupted. "He's not unfriendly," Doreen said, folding a dish towel with precision. "He's just been doing everything alone for a long time. The accident rattled that more than he'll admit. And his sister?" Doreen's hands slowed, just slightly. "Margot arrives Thursday evenings. She leaves Sunday mornings. She's very charming. She said it the way you'd say the weather forecast looks clear right before a storm. The first week, Jonathan barely spoke to Hazel beyond necessity. She read him his email, his contracts, the morning headlines from the Globe and Mail. She accompanied him to a meeting at a Bay Street firm where she sat beside him and quietly described what was being projected on the screen. Charts, comparisons, a competitor analysis in 8-point font that even she had trouble reading. On the drive back, he said, "You described the third slide wrong. The variance was 17%, not 7. The 7 had a small one beside it that was cut off by the slide border. I should have flagged the ambiguity rather than guessing." A pause. "Yes," he said. "You should have." She'd expected something sharper. She waited. "Don't do it again," he said, and then looked out the window, and that was the end of it. Doreen, when Hazel relayed this later, actually laughed. That's practically a standing ovation from him. Rosie called every evening at 7:30. This was the rule they'd made together, and Hazel held to it the way she held to most things, completely. "Mommy, Auntie June let me make pancakes. Were they good? They were a little burnt, but we put maple syrup and it was fine. That's the right approach to most problems in life. Mommy." A pause. The kind of pause only a 6-year-old could produce, full of something being considered with great seriousness. "Does the man with the eye know you're funny?" Hazel laughed, and it surprised her how fully it came out. "Not yet. You should tell him a joke. I'll keep that in reserve." One evening, near the end of the second week, Hazel was in the hallway outside the study when she heard Jonathan on the phone. She wasn't trying to listen, but the door was slightly open and the house was quiet and his voice carried. "I'm aware of what the board is saying, Theo." A pause. "I'm also aware that Margot is the one saying it to them." Another pause, longer. "I'll handle it." He said I'll handle it the way people said it when they weren't sure they could. Margot's Ashworth arrived Thursday evening in a black coat, and the specific confidence of someone who'd never had to wonder whether they belonged somewhere. She was 36, beautiful in a way that seemed engineered, and she looked at Hazel with a warmth so immediate it felt like a tactic. "You must be Hazel. John talks about you." She set her bag down and touched Hazel's arm briefly. "It's so good he finally found someone who works out. The last 3 didn't last a month. I hope to do better than that," Hazel said pleasantly. "I'm sure you will." Margot smiled. "I may need you to pull some files from the East office this weekend." "John won't mind. I'd want to check with him first." Margot's smile didn't waver. "Of course." But over dinner that evening, Hazel watched Margot's with Jonathan, the way she leaned toward him when she spoke, the way she steered conversation, the small adjustments she made to keep herself at the center of his attention. And she watched Jonathan, the way his jaw sometimes tightened before he answered, the way he'd reach for his water glass when a topic shifted too fast. She'd seen that before, not in rich people, not in Rosedale houses. She'd seen it in her own kitchen years ago, watching her mother navigate conversations with a man who always seemed to be rearranging the furniture when no one was looking. Hazel said nothing. She cleared the plates and washed them, and she thought about what Doreen had said, that she was employed by Jonathan, not by his sister. She'd hold that line carefully. It was a Saturday afternoon in November when everything shifted. Hazel was in the study, reading aloud from a contract Jonathan had been working through, when the front door opened and she heard small feet on the hardwood. Her heart stopped, then restarted. Rosie. Auntie June appeared a second later, flustered and apologetic, explaining that Rosie had been inconsolable all morning and had insisted, and June didn't know what to do, and she was so sorry. Rosie was already in the doorway of the study, wearing her old coat with the broken zipper, holding a folded piece of paper and staring at Jonathan in his chair with the particular fearlessness of children who haven't yet learned that some people are supposed to be intimidating. "Are you the man with one eye?" she asked. Jonathan turned his head toward her. The study went very still. "I have 2 eyes," he said. "One of them doesn't work the way it used to." Rosie considered this. "My friend Marcus at school has glasses and people are mean about it." "That's not fair." "No," Jonathan said slowly. "It isn't. I made you something." She walked forward. Hazel didn't breathe and held out the folded paper. "It's a drawing. Mommy said you have trouble seeing some things, so I used really big colors so it's easier." He took it. He unfolded it with both hands carefully, and he looked at it for a long time. It was Hazel, recognizable by the dark curly hair Rosie always drew on her. Beside her was a figure in a chair, and above them both was a sun that took up a third of the page, bright yellow, aggressive with warmth. "You made this for me," he said, "and for Mommy. But mostly for you because you live here and you probably don't have very many drawings." Hazel finally found her voice. "Rosie, sweetheart, she's right," Jonathan said quietly. "I don't." He set the drawing on the desk beside him, not to the side. Beside him, where he could see it. "What's your name?" "Rosie Mercer. My mom is Hazel Mercer. I'm 6 3/4, Jonathan Ashworth." He said it with a gravity that matched hers completely. "I'm 39 and considerably fewer quarters." And Rosie laughed. It filled the room the way only a child's laugh could, without permission, without apology. Hazel watched Jonathan's face and saw something happen there that she couldn't name. Not quite a smile, not quite relief, but something that looked like a window being opened in a house that had been closed all winter. June took Rosie for hot chocolate down the street while Hazel returned to the study, feeling the particular awkwardness of a moment that had shown you something you weren't sure you were meant to see. "She's yours," Jonathan said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, she's extraordinary." Hazel looked at her hands. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You should have brought her sooner." The threat came in the form of an email. Hazel found it when Jonathan asked her to sort his inbox the following Tuesday. A message from a board member named Philip that referenced a conversation with Margot's, questioning Jonathan's fitness to lead given his ongoing health challenges, and suggesting a formal review of his position before the year end. She read it twice to make sure she'd read it correctly. Then she brought it to him without editorializing. He read it, she watched his left eye track the screen, and said nothing for almost a full minute. "She's been building this for months," he said finally, not with anger. With the exhausted certainty of someone confirming something they'd been trying not to believe. "Is there anything I can do?" "Yes." He looked at her directly. "Don't tell her you've seen this. And if she asks you to pull files from the East office, you come to me first." 2 days later, Margot asked her to pull files from the East office. Hazel went to Jonathan first. What followed was the kind of week where every conversation in the house had a second conversation underneath it. Margot's moved through the space with her usual warmth, her usual competence, asking Hazel small favors, making small talk, complimenting Rosie's drawing when she noticed it still on Jonathan's desk. "He keeps everything, you know," Margot said almost fondly. "He's sentimental. It's the one thing most people don't realize about him." Hazel smiled and said nothing. She was becoming very skilled at that. On Thursday, Jonathan came to find her in the kitchen at an unusual hour. He sat at the table, which he never did, and set a folder down. "I want to show you something." Inside were financial records, property transfers, wire transfers to an account in Margot's name that didn't correspond to any compensation she was authorized to receive. The numbers were meticulous and damning. "She's been doing this for 2 years, he said. Hazel looked at the pages. She thought about Margot's smile, practiced and positioned. She thought about her mother, and the man who'd rearranged the furniture. She thought about how long it took to see something clearly when you loved someone, or when you trusted them, or when you were afraid of what seeing it clearly would cost you. "What will you do?" she asked. "I've already spoken to my lawyers." He closed the folder. "She doesn't know yet. She'll know this weekend." He paused, and then looked at her in a way she hadn't seen from him before, uncertain, just slightly, in a way that made him look closer to his actual age. "Hazel, when this becomes visible, and it will, you may be pulled into it. People will assume things about why you're here and what your influence is. I need to know that you're prepared for that." She thought of Rosie, and the boots she'd finally been able to buy. She thought of the $11. "I came here to do a job," she said. "I'm still doing it. That doesn't change." He confronted Margot on Saturday morning in the living room. Hazel was in the kitchen with Doreen and didn't need to be there. But the walls were not thick and the house was not large, and there were things she couldn't help but hear. "You've been managing my assets for 3 years and you thought I wouldn't notice. John, I was protecting you. You were protecting access. There's a difference." Silence. Then Margot's voice, quieter, more precise, the warmth entirely gone. "You're making a mistake. I know things about this company that could cause real damage. And Jonathan, steady as anything, then damage it. Whatever you do from here reflects who you are, not who I am. We're done." The front door closed 20 minutes later. Hazel heard it from the kitchen and felt something release across her shoulders that she hadn't known she'd been carrying. Doreen poured 2 cups of tea without being asked. They sat at the kitchen table and didn't say anything for a while, and that was exactly right. The weeks after were quieter. A different kind of quiet than the one Hazel had first walked into. Not the quiet of a house holding its breath, but the quiet of a house that had finally exhaled. Jonathan's physical therapy sessions became something she looked forward to more than she'd admitted. She accompanied him 3 times a week to a clinic on St. Clair, and she watched him work, methodical, demanding of himself, refusing every shortcut, and something about it felt like reading a language she was only beginning to understand. One afternoon in early December, snow coming down in the slow way that meant it would stick, he managed to complete an exercise sequence that his therapist had told him 2 weeks ago wasn't realistic yet. The therapist said, "Jonathan, that's exceptional." He was breathing hard and he looked at Hazel before he said anything else. Just looked at her for a moment, and she didn't look away. "We're not done," he said to the therapist. But she understood he wasn't only talking about the exercise. That night, Rosie called at 7:30 as always. She was working on a new drawing. "Can I send one to the man with one eye for Christmas?" "His name is Jonathan, I know." "Can I send one to Jonathan for Christmas?" Hazel thought about the first drawing, still on his desk, still there. She dusted around it twice. "I think he'd really like that." It was the week before Christmas when Jonathan asked her to meet him in the study after dinner. This was not unusual. What was unusual was that when she arrived, there was no folder on the desk, no contract to review, no correspondence to sort. He'd set a small envelope beside the lamp. "I'm going to say something," he began, "and I'd like you to let me finish before you respond." "All right. When I hired you, I thought I was solving a logistics problem." He was looking at her steadily. The way he looked at things he was taking seriously. "What I didn't anticipate was that you would also solve several problems I hadn't admitted were problems." He paused. "You didn't fix things for me. You stood beside me while I fixed them, which turns out to be a completely different thing and considerably more valuable." Hazel's chest felt tight in the way it did before something significant. "Rosie has asked me 3 times if she can visit the house again. I've been thinking about that, about what it would mean for this to be a place she visited regularly." He pushed the envelope across the desk. "Open it." Inside was a formal offer of a permanent position. The title changed, the salary a number that made her blink twice. But below the offer, in handwriting she recognized as his, was a single line that wasn't part of any formal document. "This is not only about work. I think you know that. I'd like to find out what else it's about, if you're willing." She read it twice. She looked up at him. "You hand-wrote this." Typing felt cowardly. She laughed. He smiled, a real one, the kind that reached both eyes, working and not. She hadn't seen it before, not fully. It changed his face entirely. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's fair. I'll think about it very quickly." He waited. "Yes," she said. Rosie came for Christmas Eve. She wore her new boots, dark green, waterproof, a size up, and she ran through the front hallway of the Rosedale house like she already knew which rooms were hers. Jonathan had set up a small art station in the corner of the living room. Pencils, proper ones, and a sketchbook with thick pages. Rosie found it and went very still in the particular way. Children went still when they encountered something that was exactly what they'd wanted. "Did you know I like drawing?" she asked him. "Your mother may have mentioned it." "Mommy." Rosie turned with her hands on her hips, 6 years old and completely in charge of the room. "You told him." Hazel raised her hands in surrender. Rosie considered Jonathan for a moment with the raccoon, at the park seriousness Hazel knew well. Then she picked up a pencil and sat down and said, without looking up, "I'm going to draw you walking, for when you do." Jonathan sat very still. "I'd like that," he said quietly. Hazel stood in the doorway between the hallway and the living room, watching her daughter draw and watching this man watch her daughter, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not relief, not safety exactly, but the particular warmth of being in a place that was becoming, slowly and improbably and completely, home. Outside, the snow was coming down on Rosedale the way it came down everywhere in Toronto. Without caring who lived there, without distinguishing between the streets, settling on everything equally. Hazel pressed her shoulder against the doorframe and let herself stay in that moment, not reaching past it toward anything, just there, exactly where she was. For now, that was enough. And she suspected, for the first time in a long while, that enough was just the beginning.